tell Jack about the dowry.
Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
If you don't have a wedding, we can just get married.
Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm podcasting director Chris Mosier. Donald Trump's numbers upon completing his first 100 days are in the toilet, and most of that is over his incompetent and juvenile trade policies that now threaten to drag the country into an unnecessary trade war for which every single one of us will quite literally pay the price. But some of that deserved bad juju is about the Trump regime's attempt to build a police state using immigration as an excuse. We've talked a lot about how that effort has led to the undermining of basic due process, a problem the progressive side is alarmed by, even as American conservatives celebrate or sleep through the denial of our most basic rights as Americans and as human beings. And the next step in building a federal police force that may at some point decide to kick in your door in the middle of the night is underway right now here in Texas. Francesca D'Annunzio is the Texas Observer's 2025 David McCam Investigative Reporting Fellow and has done terrific reporting work on topics ranging from deportations in the Dominican Republic, Christian nationalism, U.S.-Mexico border colonias, right-wing sheriffs, and more. Her work has been published or syndicated in The Guardian U.S., the Dallas Morning News, Religion News Service, the Global Investigative Journalism Network, the Texas Standard, and the Arizona Republic, among others. Her latest piece for the Texas Observer, entitled "Texas Police Are Slowly Joining What Could Be a Giant ICE Army," has prompted us to invite her to join us for the first time today to elaborate. Francesca D'Annunzio, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Awesome to see you. So I'll provide the TLDR here to start with. Donald Trump's ICE, his army of agents with immigration and customs enforcement, have largely assumed the role of what I would call terror squads for not only undocumented people, but people who might be mistaken for undocumented people, which includes a lot of Texans. And they've now taken to basically deputizing local law enforcement officers that in many cases have spent years building mutual trust with the communities they serve to keep everybody safe, to do their dirty work. That's what ICE wants. So Francesca, give us the basics of what you've been reporting on here.
So under the Trump administration, the Department of Homeland Security has revived what's called the 287G Task Force Model Agreement. And that essentially allows police to become roving ICE agents in their communities. To provide a little bit of context on this program, the 287G program dates back to the 1990s, and it was established under the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act of 1996, which added a new section, which is called 287G, to the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is kind of the main law governing immigration in the United States. And there are different kinds of 287G agreements, and these agreements allow some kind of formalized cooperation between local police and state police and ICE. And the task force model agreement is what some immigration attorneys have called the most aggressive form of collaboration because it allows police to be essentially ICE agents in their communities. And that model was retired under the Obama administration after controversy. But there are two other types of 287G programs as well that are primarily focused on jails. What the 287G task force model allows specifically is it allows police who are deputized and trained for this purpose, whether there's a sheriff's deputy or a municipal police officer, they are allowed to, quote, perform certain functions of an immigration officer, including, direct quote, interrogate any alien or person believed to be an alien as to his right to be or remain in the United States, end quote, arrest without a warrant anyone the officer believes is, quote, in the United States in violation of law and is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained, end quote, and also execute warrants for immigration violations and prepare immigration charging documents. And so, that I think that sums up well why some immigration attorneys have called this a really aggressive form of collaboration. And I also think it's important to bring up the history of the task force model. This existed mostly in the 2000s, this specific model of 287G. But it was retired in 2012 after lawsuits and federal investigations concerning racial profiling and also national controversies over the actions of a participating agency, which was the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And so the Obama administration ended the program.
So if I'm understanding right, and allow me to, correct any, oversimplification that I'm putting on this, it sounds to me like this would allow a local police officer without a warrant to first question someone's immigration status, whether or not they're supposed to be here. And if that officer is unsatisfied with that answer, to go ahead and arrest that person without a warrant. Am I hearing that properly?
That's the way I understand the MOU. I mean, the MOU says, do you want me to read the language out loud to you?
Sure.
The MOU says verbatim, participating, this is a direct quote, participating LEA, which stands for Law Enforcement Agency, personnel are authorized to perform the following functions pursuant to the stated authorities, subject to the limitations contained in this MOA. Direct quote. The power and authority to interrogate any alien or person believed to be an alien as to his or right to be or remain in the United States, and to process for immigration violations those individuals who have been arrested for state or federal criminal offenses. The power and authority to arrest without a warrant any alien entering or attempting to unlawfully enter the United States in the officer's presence or view, or any alien in the United States if the officer has reason to believe the alien to be arrested in the United States in violation of law and is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained. Subsequent to such arrest, the arresting officer must take the alien without unnecessary delay for examination before an immigration officer having authority to examine aliens as to their right to enter or remain in the United States. I mean, does that clarify your understanding?
Well, yeah, that sounds to me, I'm no lawyer, but that sounds to me like largely unfettered permission to arrest anyone that the officer in his own or his or her own mind decides, could possibly be present under undocumented status. So that's what that sounds like to me. Let's back up a little bit to the history as you were covering it, Francesca, of the 287G program. Do you know what happened exactly regarding racial profiling during the Obama administration that led to the program being discontinued?
Essentially, there were civil rights lawsuits filed, and the Department of Justice also did a couple of federal investigations into sheriff's offices in North Carolina and Arizona, and there were two in particular, and found like rampant racial profiling. And that is in large part what led to the end of the 287G task force model program.
Gotcha. So having said that, do these new agreements that are being entered now under the Trump administration between ICE and local law enforcement, did those agreements differ in any substantial way from what was ended under President Obama, or is it just a continuation of the same situation?
My understanding it's a continuation of the type of agreement and what the agreement is. As to whether or not the specific language in the MOUs from 2012 or 2010 are really different from MOUs now, I can't speak to that. But the immigration attorneys who I've talked to in this space about this haven't mentioned anything about the substance of the MOUs being really different.
Okay. So this is a kind of a problem that's at its beginnings here in Texas comparatively, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about Florida real quick. Florida is way out ahead of us on this particular situation. Give us the basics of what has happened thus far in Florida, and has it changed anything on the ground? Has anything happened that seems to be different from prior to the program being implemented?
In Florida, state and local and county level agencies have signed almost 200 different 287G agreements. As for the task force model agreements, they've signed well over 100.
So we're not talking individual officers. We're talking agencies. We're talking, each of these covers, multiple, ranging from dozens to hundreds of officers.
Yes, but not every agency has all of their officers trained for this program. So for the task force model, specific officers have to be trained pursuant to the MOU. And there's a lag in training right now. So if there's a department of 10 deputies, for example, maybe they'll only train 3 or 5. Just because an agency signs the MOU doesn't mean that every single officer in that department is going to be, essentially a roving ICE officer in their communities.
That's good clarity. Appreciate that. So tell us about, over to Texas. At this point, the number is much smaller. I think you've, in your piece, said 14 have signed on so far. Tell us about where they are. And as you've mentioned right there, this isn't an immediate change because there is a training aspect involved. Tell us about where the 287G situation stands right now in Texas.
Only a little more than a dozen agencies have signed a 287G task force model agreement, and most of these agencies are rural sheriff's offices that are not near big metropolitan areas, with the exception of a couple agencies. So the Attorney General's office has signed one of these agreements. They have a criminal investigations division, so not everybody who worked for the AG's office is a lawyer. They also have police. I don't know how many of their officers they're planning to train or if that training has taken place yet. The Texas National Guard has also signed one of these agreements, and the Smith County Sheriff's Office, which is the county where Tyler, Texas is located, and also the University of Texas at Tyler. And that county is home to about 245,000 people. And I asked the sheriff back in February, and he said he was planning to train, I want to say it was 15 or 20 deputies. It was more than a couple, but he wasn't planning on training his entire department. And for the Texas National Guard, the agency did not respond to any of our questions. So it's not clear exactly how the National Guard is planning to use these new authorities, or when the training will be complete, or how many soldiers will be trained, or if this is going to only be used in the border where the National Guard is already deployed, or if National Guardsmen are going to be enforcing immigration law when they're responding to hurricanes or other natural disasters, or administering vaccines for public health emergencies. It's not clear how the National Guard is going to use these new functions once people are trained.
That speaks to part of the underlying issue of putting this type of obligation or ability, into place for really would amount to public servants. As Francesca mentioned, these are the people that are responding if there's a disaster. These are the people who are responding when people are in trouble. These are the people that we want all Texans to feel confident in reaching out to if they need help. And so we've crossed a line here to where now a person who may be undocumented or may resemble an undocumented person, may be easily mistaken for an undocumented person, may be now reluctant to rely upon that help and may avoid the help when it's available, which is part of the underlying problem here. Francesca, back to what you were talking about the AG's office, we do generally think of them as being a bunch of lawyers. And so it's not surprising that they do have, an armed force that can go out and do things on the street. And then plus the Texas National Guard, we've all seen Operation Lone Star doing what it does for the last couple of years. And so that's not super unfamiliar. How would you theorize that these new powers might change the way those two agencies go about doing their business? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I don't want to speculate on what they might do, but I can speak to their expanded authorities. I mean, it is possible that Guard soldiers could be directed to do immigration enforcement while responding to natural disasters. I mean, that's possible. Is that the agency's plan? I don't know. They didn't respond to any questions about whether or not they would decline to do that, or if they're only training, a handful of people to deploy to specific counties, or if they're going to train hundreds of people. It's really unclear. The Texas National Guard has around 23,000 members. It's not clear how many are going to be trained for this purpose. So are they going to be asking people about their immigration status when responding to hurricanes? That's a question that I hope the Texas Military Department will answer for Texans.
From the public's perspective, it is somewhat reassuring that there is an additional layer and degree of training that has to go into this for individual officers to be able to act as ICE agents, basically. However, that doesn't change the public perception, because any officer you may come across day to day in any situation may be one that is trained. And so for someone who has reason to be fearful of ICE, they should assume that every officer is trained if they don't have any way of knowing any different.
San Antonio friends, Progress Texas is proud to welcome Mayor Ron Nirenberg as our guest for a live podcast taping at our Party for Progress on Tuesday, May 6th, and you're invited. We look forward to a long overdue visit to Alamo City. Again, mark that date, Tuesday, May 6th, live podcast taping with Mayor Ron Nirenberg, and good fun with you in San Antonio. See the show notes and get your tickets right now. And thanks to Austin Kaplan and the Kaplan Law Firm, Julianne Reeves, Tracy Miller, Will Judy, and more for their generous support of our San Antonio Party for Progress.
So, one place that we should take, all of these type of conversations is, show me the money and who's paying for this and what's the actual, how does the rubber hit the road in terms of, in this particular case, how does this affect the rest of the workload that these trained officers, let's just single them out, how would a trained officer's workload change in relation to what he's already supposed to be doing for his department?
So something that's interesting about the 287G task force model program, as opposed to the 287G collaboration between ICE and local police that's more focused on immigration enforcement in jails, the street level enforcement model, the task force model, is more resource intensive in a lot of ways. Like the training is 40 hours. It used to be in person. So deputies would have to, be gone for a week, et cetera. And they couldn't be doing their normal duties back home. Now that training is online, but it's still a 40-hour training. And if a deputy or officer is out doing immigration enforcement, or if they're out doing their normal duties and end up doing immigration enforcement because of 287G, then that is another officer or deputy who is not doing their local policing duties.
Right.
And so for some smaller counties and even mid-sized counties, it so far hasn't made a lot of sense. Like I've talked to law enforcement who said they're not opposed to collaboration with ICE, but working together at the jail level makes more sense for them than doing street level enforcement, because it's more resource intensive to do street level enforcement as if they were, ICE deportation officers.
Right.
I mean, and if a county has like 4 deputies, if 1 or 2 of them has to be gone to do ICE training, or gets tied up in immigration enforcement, then that's half the police force that is not doing their normal duties. And then for a medium-sized county, I mean, it still is more resource intensive than the jail enforcement model. I talked to the Tarrant County and Collin County sheriffs recently. So those are 2 very fast-growing counties in the Dallas area. Both sheriffs are Republican. These jurisdictions tend to be, I guess, more purple. Like they've been red for a long time, but have sometimes tilted blue. And the sheriffs are both Republican. And they are interested in 287G participation. And the Collin County sheriff told me he's planning to sign a jail-focused agreement, not the task force model.
Mm-hmm.
And the Tarrant County sheriff already has this kind of participation, but at the jail level. I don't know if he's interested in the task force model or not, but it's just something that's a lot more resource intensive. And so some police might not even want to do this, even if they are really pro collaborating with ICE or support the current administration's immigration agenda. It just doesn't necessarily make sense for some law enforcement agencies, even if they ideologically are in agreement with the Trump administration's goals.
So just so I understand, so an officer who's, say on an 8-hour shift, ends up coming across someone that he's going to target under his ICE training. That's going to take at least 3 or 4 hours probably to process that person from plucking them off the street to getting them in front of other people to confirm or figure out whether or not the person should be here. Are those hours that are now being done really for ICE, for the federal government, still paid for by the taxpayers who are putting their money into paying for the police force? And so do you know if there's a financial incentive? Is there extra funding that comes from the federal level to the local level in cases where these agencies decide to cooperate?
As of right now, no. As of right now, the federal government does not reimburse local jurisdictions for doing ICE duties. So there's not really a financial incentive. So if someone is a sheriff's deputy or a city police officer, if they spend half their day doing ICE functions, that doesn't mean more federal money for that agency, the local agency. As of now, that could change in the future. But as of now, that doesn't mean more federal money. There's really not that kind of incentive. And the jail enforcement model doesn't require so much more of police.
So to sum up, if your local police agency, your county sheriff or your city police signs up to cooperate with ICE under this task force 287G model, what's basically happening is your local officers and their superiors are agreeing to spend time that you are paying for your local public safety instead on the goals of ICE and the Trump administration to round up undocumented people. So that's just to me is just a straight little set of arithmetic, really. If a local police officer is being paid 8 hours of time by the taxpayers in that community, but he's only spending 4 hours of that time actually enforcing the law and keeping people safe in that community, then the taxpayers are being shortchanged, I would say.
Yeah, it is interesting that there's not a federal financial incentive offered for this kind of agreement, but that perhaps could change in the future. But as of now, that's the way things are.
Very interesting. One final thing to cover with you, Francesca. There's a story, and this isn't your reporting. This actually came from the Independent, from what I'm reading here. A mother and her children over in Oklahoma, just over the Red River, that to me provides a possible indicator of how all this could really go sideways. Mom and her daughters, all U.S. citizens, were targeted in their home in an overnight ICE raid by mistake. Humiliated by being forced to stand outside in their undergarments while the officers ransacked their house. Officers took their phones, and the officers took, importantly, a bunch of the mom's money, cash that was present there that represented a bunch of her life savings. To her story, which to our knowledge, none of that has been returned to them. So this family's in a really, really bad situation over a raid that was botched. It was targeted at a person who was a previous tenant of the home in which they were living, the house where they were living. So Francesca, if agents under direct federal control in this Oklahoma case can screw up a raid to this degree, is it a reasonable leap to think that officers that aren't under direct federal control, who are really just have the benefits of the supplemental training, may be more prone to these kinds of mistakes? Do you see it going that direction?
That's certainly possible. What I can say is that past DOJ investigations and lawsuits have unearthed a history of racial profiling with this program that has really impacted communities of color in places where these agreements were signed. And this program has been shown to be, according to advocates and the DOJ, ripe for abuse. And this program acts as a force multiplier for ICE, which only has around 6,000 deportation agents. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes sense that people are worried that the abuses of the past, that the racial profiling would repeat again under the expansion of this program.
To me, in my mind, there's a reason why we have, federal officers that do federal things, and we have border officers that do border things. And then we have local police who are supposed to keep their local communities safe, and that requires a certain degree of mutual trust and respect. And what is going to be lost here, again, is that relationship that many of these police officers, the best of our officers, have worked really hard and find it, very personally important to their work and the mission that they undertake to have that kind of relationship with the people who are there, charged with keeping safe. And so this will do nothing but undermine that for sure, and give folks who are either undocumented again or who could easily be mistaken for being undocumented just all that much more to fear. And my suspicion is that is the ultimate goal to begin with. And so this has been a really enlightening conversation, Francesca. We really, really appreciate the information. Anything that we haven't talked about in your coverage of this topic that you'd like to put out there before you wrap?
I want to make clear, ICE only has 6,000 deportation agents. And Congress might pass a budget that would supercharge ICE's funding. And the Trump administration has enlisted the help of other federal agencies like the DEA and the IRS to prioritize immigration enforcement instead of the agency's primary functions and duties and their original mission and functions. But even with that, if the Trump administration wants to have historic levels of deportations, having 6,000 agents, that's not enough people to carry out that agenda. And even having these federal agents, that also is likely not enough to carry out that agenda. And because so far into Trump's second term, there are not historic levels of deportations. Trump is still lagging behind the Obama administration. Obama deported more people than Trump did in his first term. And quite frankly, right now, there doesn't seem to be the infrastructure to do 1 million deportations a year. There aren't enough beds, there aren't enough officers. And to have an expansion of something like this, like the 287G task force model program, where local police can functionally become ICE agents in their communities to a degree, that is the necessary force multiplier, or one of them, to ratchet up deportations under the second Trump administration. And so I think this is something that people should pay attention to in their communities. This expansion of facilities that could hold detainees and, possible pending future deportees. I think this is the moment to pay attention to, because 6,000 deportation officers, I don't see how it's possible they could detain and remove 1 million people a year. So I think that's some important context to add.
Francesca D'Annunzio at the Texas Observer, and we really, really appreciate your work and your time and the information, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Chris.
Our mission at Progress Texas is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, but they far outmatch us in funding. Oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups spend a lot of money keeping their audiences in the dark. If you've come to appreciate the light we shine on important political news in Texas on a daily, ongoing basis, please know that our regular, everyday listeners form a key component of our funding. If that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate, like Phil Sokolsky, Cherie Allen, and Matt Berry all have. We appreciate all of you very much. That's the Progress Texas Happy Hour, and we'll catch you again next time. Thanks for listening.